The jaw pain started earlier in the week. It was starting to radiate into my chest to the point where I was on my hands and knees in bed, unable to focus on anything but the pain. By Friday morning, I was flat on my back and strapped to an EKG machine in the emergency room, next to an old lady who kept saying every 10 seconds, "My tummy hurts! My tummy hurts!" I hope these aren't the last words I ever hear. As usual, the emergency room was doing a brisk business. There was a high school girl who had a fractured pelvis as a result of a car wreck. She was getting a lot of visitors. Her friend was a couple of beds away. Alcohol may have been a factor. They moved me to bed number 8. It was real good to be out of the hallway. The guy in bed number 9 was talking to the nurse. He had an infection. "I'm sorry, darling. At first I thought it was a blister. I'm self-employed and I don't have any insurance, so I treated myself until the pain got too bad. I don't mind losing the toe, but I don't want to lose my foot. I have to stand on my feet all day." Turns out he had his own dog grooming business. I didn't see that one coming. I saw him walk in with his buddy. I had him pegged for a plumber's helper or maybe an oil change guy. You just never know. There's a 94-year-old woman 2 beds over taking a fall. Then there was the reasonably attractive red-faced young woman I almost walked in on being escorted out of the bathroom by the sheriff's deputy, who was carrying a urine sample. Well, I mean, as pretty as you can be when you're handcuffed at the waist with a leg chain, shortly after peeing in a cup. I'm sure even she would agree this wasn't her best look. The doctor came in with the results of my EKG. And he said, "We're troubled by the changes in your EKG. We're going to keep you in the hospital. We're just looking for a bed." Well, if I wasn't having chest pains before, I am now. And then after that, there was a series of visits from technicians, several members of the cardiac team, someone from the respiratory unit, a nutritionist, and a random sampling of people with no discernible purpose. The left side of my heart is only pumping 45% of the blood it's supposed to. What followed over the next 7 hours was a regular series of questions, blood tests, and EKGs. Are you having chest pains now? Are you experiencing shortness of breath? Are you having any swelling? Do you have any tingling in your arm? When did the pain start? Where did the pain start? What were you doing when the pain started? Can you describe the pain? Does your jaw hurt? Can you describe the pain? Between 1 and 10, how bad is the pain? Are you having any swelling? Do you suffer from acid reflux? Do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol? Do you use any illegal drugs? I hadn't eaten all day because they weren't sure what they were going to do. So by 5 o'clock, they brought me some food. It was easily one of the top 5 meals I've ever eaten in my entire life. For the record, it was meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans. I make a mental note to add this to the list of possible last meal options. I still have pain in my chest, but I'm not having chest pains. When they decided to move me upstairs, I asked the nurse if they put you in a wheelchair or they pushed you into bed. She asked me if I had a preference. I thought a wheelchair would be more dignified. Dignity is a fickle mistress. Now, the last time I was personally in an emergency room as opposed to just visiting, I ended up in it after a night of drinking. The last thing I remember that night was sitting in a bar next to a guy, and he turned to me and he said, "This place is dead." I said, "Yeah, you're right. Follow me." Next thing I know, I woke up naked on a metal table with a sheet over me. First thing I did was look for a toe tag. Second thing I looked for was my pants. So they're throwing words around like sinus rhythm, abnormal T, left atrial enlargement, possible ischemia widespread, V-rate blockage, stent, arteries, heart disease, family history, and stress test. Now, after a routine visit to my, I'm going to back up a little bit. After a routine visit to Las Vegas to visit my parents, I had my first stress test in UKG. Just after a routine visit, they wanted to check. And my ex-brother-in-law, who's a surgeon, not a heart surgeon, said after looking at my EKG results that it appeared I'd had a heart attack. Wait, can you have a heart attack and not know it? Sure, he said. At least he waited till after dessert. So anyway, I have a treadmill stress test the next day, which was conducted by a middle-aged German woman. I thought this will be a breeze. I only have to do it for about 10 or 15 minutes. So I start out strong. Maybe a little too strong. Pace yourself, I think. I don't need to lead the pack. I just need to finish. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. So I ease up a little. I decided to focus on my breathing. So I focus on my breathing. Then I focus on the mountains outside the window. Then I start to focus on the cars in the parking lot. Then I start to focus on lunch. Winners never quit. Quitters never win. I will reach the mountaintop. Okay, now I'm starting to feel the burn. Okay, it starts on my side now. It's reached my eyes. I am now completely drenched in sweat, and I can no longer see. My knees are weak, my chest hurts, and I can't breathe. And I may have already lost control of my bowels. Don't give up now, you're almost there, I tell myself. Is someone making toast? Dear Lord, if you let me finish this test, I will be a more patient and loving man. Oh God, don't let me vomit on the window. If I now increase the speed a little bit, says a voice from the not too distant past. I'm now being thrown to and fro like a marionette. Centrifugal force and gravity are the only things keeping me attached to the treadmill at this point. I am now singing in German. I quickly switched to Spanish. No mas! No mas! Helga stops the treadmill, helps me off, and sighs audibly. The total elapsed time of my stress test was less than 5 minutes. I lasted less time than my 78-year-old father who had just had a bypass. The doctor said to me later, in a voice more resigned than judgmental, "You're not in good shape." Would have hurt less to be punched. I promised I would eat right, stop smoking. So anyway, they finally moved me upstairs. And it's a double room with one bed, so life is starting to get better. And the nurse up there gives me the rundown. If you have any valuables, give them to your wife. Things tend to grow legs around here overnight, so I give my wife my wallet and keep my phone in my pocket. I guess we'll also find out if things also grow hands. And she also says you won't be able to eat or drink anything after midnight, so you need to eat something now. So my wife brings me back a chicken sandwich, a banana, and a cookie. So I have a big mouthful of food when a nurse comes in the room, wearing a sign that says Echo, pushing a big machine. And she says, "Is it Chris or Christopher?" Now I've got a mouthful of food, and I'm gesturing, trying to convey the universal sign for I heard and understood everything you said, but my mouth is completely full at the moment, and I'm going to be right with you. She takes a beat and looks at my wife and says, "Oh, is he deaf?" Now I'm chewing furiously and gesturing frantically, trying to get her attention. I'm not deaf! I tried to sign. And she just waved to me and said, that's cool. I've seen worse. So I was sent away from home when I was a child. And back it up a little bit. I had been displaying increasingly bad behavior in school. I was refusing to do any schoolwork, and I wasn't going to let anybody else do it. Bunch of fucking deadbeats, you know? So the teacher tried moving my desk up front next to her to hopefully keep a better eye on me and exert some control. Yeah, it didn't work. So I ended up spending most of my time in the hallway or the principal's office. I was sent to Green Chimney School in Brewster, New York. I had been referred there by a psychiatrist I began seeing after threatening to commit suicide at the school. I got really depressed after seeing a story in the paper about a couple of astronauts that had died while flying into a building. It was Elliot C. and Charlie Bassett. They had died while trying to land in bad weather, and they crashed into the building where their Gemini 9 spacecraft was being assembled. Bassett's head was later found wedged in the rafters. And I had seen the story on the front page of the paper my father was reading that morning. And I had show and tell that day. So I used that story. I think one kid did card tricks and another one played the trumpet. It was actually a bad couple of years for astronauts. Between the years 1966 and 67, 7 NASA astronauts died. 4 in training flight mishaps, and 3 in a launch pad fire. 5 of the schools in my hometown at that time were named after astronauts, including Gus Grissom, who died in the launch pad fire. I went to Allen B. Shepard Elementary, which was named after the first American in space and the 5th man to walk on the moon, where he hit 2 golf balls. And I don't know what all these numbers add up to except this one fucked up kid. Whenever someone threatens suicide, the first question they always ask is, do you have a plan? I had a plan. I was going to run into traffic in front of the school. I didn't say it was a great plan. And it probably also bears repeating that I was an angry child. And like a lot of kids, I went through a pretty serious knife throwing phase. Not all the time. But whenever I got upset, it just seemed like the best and most effective way to end the conversation. And it certainly changed the conversation. Somewhere around this time, they put me on Melrose, which is part of the Thorazine family. Melrose is an antipsychotic drug of low potency used in the treatment of disorganized and psychotic thinking. It also helps with false perception. Green Chimneys teaches children basic living and coping skills, especially anger management, by allowing them to care for injured wildlife and resident farm animals. And this is from the history of Green Chimneys. Okay, so the day they dropped me off, I stood at the front fence and watched them leave. The road, it was Old Putnam Road back then, was a long straight road that stretched all the way to the horizon. I stood at that fence for hours with tears streaming down my face, just watching the last spot I'd seen in the car, waiting for him to come back and get me. No one came to get me. Eventually it got dark and I got tired, and I went to the dorm. My bed was in a large room that held a dozen or so metal bunk beds. I had a bottom bunk near the entrance. At some point that night I cried myself to sleep. I was 8 years old, summer after 2nd grade, 1966. The average child stays at Green Chimneys for about 2.5 years. I was there for 7.5. By the time I left, I was like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption. When I woke up the next morning, I felt as if a tremendous weight had been lifted off me, almost relief. Not only did I feel okay, I actually felt great. I think that's the last time I ever cried when they dropped me off. Never again. And by the way, the original name of the place was Green Chimney School for Little Folk. The name I thought, how could you not feel safe, you know? The farm was originally home to circus people in the late 1800s. There's a small Ringling Brothers cemetery down the road from what's now the main campus. Legendary jazz musician Thelonious Monk's daughter went to Green Chimneys a couple of years before I did. He even wrote a song called Green Chimneys. And Green Chimneys was a farm, and it had a lot of the requisite animals that went with it. We had horses, pigs, goats, barn owls, chickens, dogs, cats, assorted rabbits, snakes, the occasional raccoon, and cows. Until the cows got rustled during the big beef shortage of the early 70s. So I grew up around the smell of horses, manure, and pig slop. I grew up in the woods. I played in the fields. I played in the trees. I played in the creeks. I watched animals being born, and I watched them die. I fed them. I washed them. I talked to them. I avoided them. I've been stepped on by a horse, been butted by a goat, been bitten by a chicken. Okay, first of all, I don't blame the chickens for what happened. Anymore. It's taken years, but thanks to the benefit of hindsight, long-term sobriety, and eating a lot of chicken. A shitload of chicken. I can now see that it wasn't entirely personal. They were just doing what chickens do. Which in this particular case happened to be attacking a small defenseless child from behind in a systematic, relentless, unprovoked, and malevolent act of pure chicken rage. Or perhaps, to be charitable, it was just for sport. Which makes it actually even worse. I'm telling you, it was like gimme shelter, and the chickens were the Hell's Angels. Their little beaks were like tiny pool cues beating me about the head and shoulders. It was like Lord of the Flies with chickens. It was dances with wolves, and the wolves were chickens, and I was a fucking buffalo. No. It was like the Attica prison riots in 1971 in upstate New York. The prisoners were riding over prison conditions. What the hell were the chickens bitching about? We were all doped up and surrounded by an electric fence. We were all doing time. I just happened to be in a bigger cage. That's the thing about chickens, though, man. They never see the big picture. We should have all been working together, not turning on each other, because that's what they want. Of course, if you expect anything less from a chicken, you're an idiot. So I lived in the main dorm where the dining hall was for most of my time there. And before they built a separate dorm a couple of years later, the girls were also in the same dorm as us. Then there was an older a dorm across the quadrangle for older kids, 7th and 8th graders, where you got to go when you're that age or you were well behaved. I finally made it my last year. A feat in which I celebrated by dismantling my bed and trying to throw it out the window. The dining room was wood panels, like give it a rustic vibe like a lodge in the Adirondacks or a permanent summer camp. All the meals were served family style. The table of 6 or 8 kids, and you had a big bowl, and you had an older kid serve it and pass it down. There was a couple of payphones in the corner of the dining room where you got to make your collect calls home, if you had a home. And one of the things they were all about us teaching us, life lessons, how to, life skills, make your bed, set the table, respect each other, shower, brush your teeth, that kind of stuff. And one of the things they had us do was write home regularly. And the thing is, they had a formula. Every letter had to start with the words, after you said, dear mommy, daddy, whoever, how are you? I am fine. Every letter. They checked every letter going out. How are you? I am fine. If you didn't do it, you had to do it over. And actually, my mom sent me a bunch of my letters a few years ago. This is a copy of one of my earliest letters, maybe my earliest letter. Dear Mommy and Dad, Green Chimney. So obviously they didn't check for spell. Brewster, New York, 11/15/1967. How are you? I am fine. Howard, Mark, and Scott, and Stacy, and Kelly. And by the way, that's my brothers and sisters in the exact order of their birth. So obviously the mellow roll was kicking in. Disorganized thinking my ass. Are they all right? I ask. I mean, you gotta ask, right? I mean, I'm doing time, but by all means, how the hell are they, you know? Will you please send me a package? I got a package from Aunt Alice yesterday. Love, Christopher. Okay, first of all, even back then it was all about the package. Did you get a package? How can you get a package? What was in the package? You want to share your package? I'll give you a part of my package for part of your package. If I don't have a package, but when I get one, I'll give you a package. Second of all, I've never gone by Christopher, ever. My mom calls me Christopher mostly as a term of endearment, but mostly not. And I certainly never referred to myself as Christopher. That's just a man with big hands. And, well, and actually, thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, I'm so glad to see I got a package from my Aunt Alice. That was nice. And what I really remember most about Aunt Alice was she lived in Jimthorpe, Pennsylvania. She was an ex-nun. She always wore a housecoat and she smoked cigarettes. So, if memory serves and history is any indication, she probably sent me a carton of smokes and a crucifix. One of which came in handy later. She was a wonderful woman. Anyway, so I come from a long line of comics and heart trouble. Throw in high blood pressure, alcoholism, drug addiction, adultery, depression, and divorce. And we're just another American thing. Most of the men on my father's side were comics, and they almost all died from heart attacks, including my grandfather's uncle Lou Anger, who started as a comic and was the head of production at Paramount Studios in the early days of Hollywood. He managed Fatty Arbuckle, and he also worked with Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. Remind me to show you the pictures sometime. He died from a heart attack. My father's father, Harry Anger, as my father called him, the real Harry Anger, was also a comic. We called him Grandpa. He was a headliner in vaudeville. He got his start in show business when he was 16. He ended up being a producer and an agent who discovered Abbott and Costello and Red Skelton. He later went on to produce, among other things, the Perry Como Show. My mother still has this beautiful serving dish that he gave my parents on their wedding day. Here's a review from a show Grandpa did in Charleston, South Carolina in 1917. Harry Anger and the King sisters, FYI, my wife's maiden name is King. I don't know what it means. Offer a variety bill entitled On the Road to Pocus. It is full of laughter, and the comedy of Mr. Anger is refreshing and decidedly enjoyable. He keeps the audience in a good humor and is a splendid performer. The King sisters are charming and take off their parts well. They are vivacious and are admirably suited to the roles which they interpret. He later married my grandmother, Mary Fair, real name Ferry. She was a dancer and she was also a headliner in vaudeville. Together they had an act. Here's what the Daily Star was saying about them in January of 1929. Harry Anger and Mary Fair have a new skit. Dizzy 1929. Miss Fair, we called her Honey, who plays opposite Mr. Anger for comedy purposes, is one of Broadway's most enterprising dance creators, and this season brings her latest dance, Broadway Mooch. Grandpa had a heart attack and died while having sex with Honey. Then we talked about his big finish. I mean, what do you say? I mean, there's a million jokes, and I'm pulling a muscle, not saying any of them. But anyway, if you gotta go, right? Anyway, then there was Al Anger, Grandpa's brother. He was a burlesque comic, and he was married at least a few times, and at least the last two were strippers. FYI. He had a heart attack and died right after finishing a show in Miami in 1966. Here's how the Miami paper remembered Uncle Al. Burlesque comic Al Anger, who started in vaudeville when he was 17, died yesterday. Carrying on the tradition, the show must go on. Anger had felt sick before the midnight show at the Gailey Theater, but he wouldn't quit. But his stage partner, Barbara Curtis, his wife in real life, he went through his routine in baggy pants and wide pork pie hat to a splendid audience response. A heart attack came shortly after the last show, and he just walked off stage, had a heart attack, and died right in the wings. At 4 a.m., he was taken to the Miami Heart Institute, where he died. His brother Samuel, Uncle Sam, said, Al had other heart attacks before, and when we suggested he retire, he told us he would die in the theater. He started in vaudeville and kid act with his sister and went into burlesque in the 40s, appearing with comics Phil Silvers and Pinky Lee. So if you have a Google machine, Google. They were big. He'd been in Miami 5 weeks when he died. My father's had to have a triple bypass. 90% of his left atrial descending coronary artery was blocked. They call it the Widowmaker. He now has 2 stents. My oldest brother had a heart attack, or a myocardial infarction. And he just passed a stress test right before he had a heart attack. On a related note, I was talking to a buddy of mine about his heart trouble. Because once you have heart trouble, I mean, it's what you do. And his left atrial descending coronary artery was 95% blocked. He has 5 stents holding it open. 5. Or as they call it in the business, the full metal jacket. Along with heart trouble, another genetic component we all share is alcoholism and drug addiction. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. My dad's an alcoholic and a drug addict. My oldest brother's an alcoholic and a drug addict. 3 out of my 4 grandparents were alcoholics, except for Grandpa. My father said his mother, honey, drank so much he missed World War II. When I quit drinking, I didn't realize Ronald Reagan had been a 2-term president. My mother's mother, Nona, fell asleep and torched almost the whole downstairs of her beautiful house in Washington, D.C. We visited shortly after the fire, and the whole bottom of the house was charred, the walls were black, and it all smelled like smoke. And she was still living upstairs in her big 4-poster bed with a cartons of cigarettes by the side of her bed, a case of whiskey by her floor by her bed, an ashtray, and a real early remote. So everything she needed was just arm's length away. Okay, so after my echo, I get a roommate the next morning. And they wheel this guy in who looked like he'd just been scalped. He had fresh stitches from the front of his forehead all the way to the back of his head, and then he had another fresh row of stitches from eyebrow to eyebrow. It looked like a giant letter T. You can see where they just cut him open and peel back the skin for easy access. He looked like Frankenstein's younger half-brother. The only thing missing was a couple of bolts in his neck and a zipper. He was back after a week. He had an infection, so they were going back in. And the doctor came in and asked him what had happened. He said, we're not sure. It happened at work. Apparently a giant flying pipe had hit him in the head. And he tells the doctor, we're not really sure what happened. We think it was an accident. Okay, first of all, for his sake, I hope it was an accident. And second of all, we? I don't know, if I've been hit in the head by a giant flying pipe at work, I'd be ready to take the party line just yet. And he comes back after his latest brain surgery. Sean, that was his name. I can use his real name. He was all doped up, semi-conscious, and in a lot of pain. And he kept saying over and over to his girlfriend and mother, 2 different people. My fucking head is killing me. I'm in so much fucking pain. And he apologizes to me through the curtain and says, I'm sorry about the foul language, really. I said, dude, I'm the last fucking guy you need to worry. So, after results of my echo, they schedule a stress test. I give them the short version of the last one. And they say, okay, no treadmill. So they do the chemical stress test or a nuclear stress test. And the woman doing it was really nice. And the basic gist of it is they want to get your heart rate up to a certain level so they can see if you've had a heart attack. So they finish the test and they send me back to my room to wait for the results. And the doctor eventually comes in. There's a teaching hospital, so he's always trailed by a team of young doctors with filthy lab coats. And they're all really so young, they look like they've all been out playing in the yard. The doctor says, definitively, whatever happened, it was not a heart attack. I think I mentioned my brother had a heart attack right after passing the stress test, right? And I'm still having chest pain. And the doctor says to me, there are 50 things in your chest that can cause you pain that have nothing to do with your heart. I draw a little comfort from this knowledge. They sent me home with coupons for a heart-healthy soup, validated parking, and constipation. One of the few times I let Denise drive. In the early to mid-'80s, I lived in a flea bag hotel in downtown Oakland. Now, flea bag is a little bit of a misnomer. Cockroaches were the real problem. I was surviving on a steady diet of fortified wine, canned spaghetti, and cigarettes. Night Train was my drink of choice. And for those of you who don't know what Night Train is, it's for people that think Sterno costs too damn much. I've been told the 3 basic ingredients in Night Train are alcohol, sugar, and formaldehyde. When I quit drinking, I had over 200 empty Night Train bottles in my room. As my father said at the time, Chris, that's not social drinking. It makes sense now. So I moved out of downtown Oakland about 6 months after I quit drinking to a rent-controlled 1-bedroom apartment in North Berkeley. I cannot overstate the importance of having your own bathroom. I felt like a man. And eventually I got better jobs and I started making friends and I started having a relationship. My life was getting better. I had another pair of shoes, an extra pair of pants, and I started wearing underwear. In 1990 I got a job with the city of Berkeley. So I used to work at the main branch of the Berkeley Public Library. It was a great job, and I met a lot of great people, not the least of whom was my wife, Denise. So that alone made it a great job. We both worked in circulation. Well, originally I was a shelver, and she worked in circulation. And we met at the return desk. Anyway, I come down and pick up books, and we got to talking. But we really got to know each other when I got a temporary full-time job in circulation. And we both worked the same nights, and we ended up taking our dinner breaks together. Our first official date was supposed to be a Leonard Cohen concert. We ended up going to a movie the night before. Equinox, if you must know. So one day at work, I look up and see a guy who looks like Adolf Hitler. Not sort of. Exactly like Adolf Hitler. This was not accidental. This guy was shooting for historical accuracy. His face, mustache, and hair were all Hitler. I mean, he wasn't going full stormtrooper here. You know, there was no swastika, no German Shepherd. He wasn't marching through the lobby giving everyone a stiff-arm salute. And he was wearing a uniform khaki shirt, buttoned up to the neck. He had a tool, kind of a gun belt looking thing, and army boots with the pants tucked in. The look could best be described as Nazi casual. Hitler on a Sunday. Now, Hitler at the beach, if you will. So this guy was one of our regulars. He'd come in all the time and check out books on the mummies and the Third Reich. Doesn't he own these yet? So one day he comes in and checks out a book on embalming. Right. Embalming. And I thought, well, you got to check it out, because otherwise it's censorship. But do I have a legal obligation to alert the authorities? Should I have him sign something absolving me of any culpability? Is there a waiting period for guys that look like Hitler to check out a book on embalming? Make a mental note to talk to a lawyer. Lawyers in the library was usually on Tuesday nights. So anyway, it was kind of interesting because you'd see him and you'd be wandering through, real casually walking through the library. And then it was always sort of interesting to watch people's reactions. Because most people kind of avert their eye contact. And some people, and especially in Berkeley, would look at him in that know-it-all Berkeley way like, I've seen better Hitlers. Big deal. I saw Mahatma Gandhi buying tires the other day. I saw Mussolini eat a falafel down the block. But some people would just kind of go, they're like, they're blank face, and then after you walk by, they just turn to their friend and go, did I see what I think I just saw? Yeah, you did. That is Adolf Hitler hanging out by the copy. All right, so as if having Adolf Hitler wandering the stacks wasn't enough. Another one of our regulars was a guy who looked like Abraham Lincoln. Seriously. Same deal. And he wasn't wearing a stovepipe hat, and he wasn't walking around with a short, mentally ill woman. Now let me just stop for 1 second. If you spend any amount of time in Berkeley, at some point a short, mentally ill woman will yell at you. That's a whole other story. So at one point he's checking out yet another book on Lincoln. And finally I said to him, hey, anybody ever tell you? Apparently Abe wasn't noticed for his sense of humor. Alright, so I'm on the bus one day, and the Lincoln guy gets on. My first thought is, don't make eye contact. So I go back to reading what I'm reading. And I realize after a couple of minutes the bus isn't moving. So I look up, and the bus driver is talking to the Lincoln guy, and the Lincoln guy is sitting there, ignoring the bus driver and refusing to pay. So the bus driver's talking to him for a little while, and the bus driver finally gives up and gets on the phone. Meanwhile, we're just sitting there. We're blocking traffic. People are starting to get pissed. One guy starts yelling, "Let my people go!" Some spontaneous drum circle starts in the back of the bus. Some guy tried to sell me a timeshare on the moon. I mean, nothing. We're not doing anything, and everybody's getting pissed and agitated. Finally, the cops come and drag this guy off the bus. I'm telling you, it took less time to free the slaves than to get this asshole off the bus. It's a nightmare. Okay, so another one of our regulars was a woman who looked like Betsy Ross. Seriously. And of course, this being downtown Berkeley, every other person that came in looked like the Unabomber. Which actually makes perfect sense, since Ted Kaczynski did spend most of his pre-manifesto days at Cal. He never would have gotten picked out of a lineup in Berkeley. I tell you, Ted could have bought himself another couple of years on the run if he just stayed put. So, I'm thinking about all this one day at work. Just for the heck of it, why don't we round up some of these people and have a historical figures night at the library? We've already got a hell of a lineup. We got Hitler, Lincoln, Betsy Ross, a whole bunch of Unabombers, and a buddy of mine looks exactly like Henry Kissinger. Well, if Kissinger was alcoholic and homeless. And trust me, he should be. Shit, if we can come up with a wheelchair and a horse, we got two of the Roosevelts in the reading room right now. 3 if you count the drag queen and checkout. All right, so about this time I'm at the return desk, and a woman comes up to me and says, "I just thought you should know. there's a naked woman on crutches singing the blues in the women's restroom. Does she look like Nina Simone? We just got our headline here. Okay, so after I got out of the hospital, by a mere coincidence, I had a previously scheduled appointment with my nurse practitioner. And she said, let's go ahead and schedule a cardiac cath. Almost 2 weeks later, I hadn't heard back about the cath. So in the interim, I was out walking the dog one day, and I started having chest pains. Let me stop you there. That's not unusual. I've had chest pains for years. I still have. I'm having them now. So don't grab your paddles just yet, dude. It can take more than chest pains and vertigo to get me back in the house. Alright, so at this point my arm starts to get numb. Once again, not that unusual. I've got carpal tunnel, so a numb arm and tingling fingers is business as usual. Okay, now I'm numb up to the shoulder and my chest is tight. I'm quickly moving up to number 5 on the list of 50 things in your chest that can cause you pain. At this rate, I'll be number 1 with a bullet before I reach the end of the block. It's February and it's cold, and I feel like I maybe got too many layers on it. My coat's starting to feel kind of snug. Here's the other thing about us. We Angers are not the best patients. My brother had to actually be talked into going to the hospital when he was having his heart attack. And by the way, he was walking his dog. So the obvious lesson here is don't walk your dogs and you should be okay. So I make it home, I take an aspirin and sit on the couch. Who says commercials don't work? Pain is past, I ain't going to the hospital. But we call the doctor and ask him what the holdup on the cath is. We tell him I'm still experiencing symptoms. And he said, well, they're working on it, and if I still feel like I'm experiencing symptoms, I should go straight to the emergency room. And they can do the cath there. I draw no comfort from this knowledge. Instead, I call my friend Becky, who's a nurse at the hospital where they're supposed to do the cath. She says, let me talk to somebody. Somebody calls me back almost immediately. 2 days later, I'm on the table. So usually you'll be awake during a cardiac catheterization, but given medications to help you relax. Recovery time for a cardiac catheterization is quick, and there's a low risk of complications. This is straight from the Mayo Clinic's website. So my time arrives, they wheel me in, slide me on the table, shave, catheterize, and do the introductions before I knew what was happening. It was like I was on the assembly line in a catheter factory. Next! And I think I explained this earlier. I haven't had a drink or a drug in a really long time. So I'm thinking, I don't know. Maybe I get a free one today. I don't want to get high. I'm not looking for a quick fix. I don't miss being drunk or high at all. I don't miss the lifestyle for 1 second. Everything good that has happened in my life has happened because and since I quit drinking and doing drugs. But if for some reason they need to pump me full of drugs to help save my life, let's get this motherfucking party started. It ain't that kind of party. I don't get high, I'm not even that relaxed. I can see in here just about everything. The only drug I remember them mentioning is heparin. This is an anticoagulant. It's a blood thinner. I'm not hearing words like Dilaudid, morphine, oxy, goofballs, horse, junk, smack, bennies, yellow jackets, Mary Jane, or hooch. And that's mainly because I don't happen to be in a 50s juvenile. It's all blah, 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 heparin, blah, 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 heparin. I'm definitely not getting a buzz here. Approximately 180,000 or more people die in hospitals each year for things other than what they came in. Andy Warhol went in for a gallbladder operation. It never came out. John Coronado, the alcoholic chain-smoking, piano-playing bartender at Alice Harrison Tavern in downtown Oakland, who never went to the doctor, went to the doctor. Died a week later. 100,000 people or more each year die from infections they pick up in a hospital alone. Most common infections are from a ventilator and a catheter. Medical errors are the 5th largest cause of death in America, up to 100,000 people a year. That's more than car accidents, AIDS, or breast cancer. Number 1 is heart disease. Between infections and heart disease, I'm looking at 2 in the top 5. All right, so they're digging around in my groin for a while. And I gotta tell you, never so much attention to my groin brought me so little pleasure. The doctor stops and says to me, "Your right coronary artery is 100% blocked. Would you like us to unblock it?" What the hell are you asking me for? What are we doing here? So I asked him, I said, well, how many people are walking around with one of their 3 main coronary arteries completely blocked? I asked him. He said, millions. So should we unblock it? Now I didn't realize at the time I was hedging or waffling with the doctor. So he finally yelled, "Somebody get his wife!" And she came in the room and said, "Do it." Which is probably the answer I would have given. So, coronary angioplasty is a procedure to open a narrow or blocked coronary artery. The procedure restores blood flow to the heart. They do the angioplasty and put a stent in. So I got 1 stent, part of the stent fit. At one point during the operation, the doctor answered his phone. I'm not sure I want him multitasking at this point. And after I'd been done with all that, one of the nurses said to me, "We're surprised you didn't feel worse." I told her I never actually ever felt good. I was dizzy and had chest pains for years. One doctor told me I'd taken the antacid. It didn't help. So they put me on a daily regimen of baby aspirin, Plavix, cardavilol, and gave me a prescription for nitroglycerin. And they keep me overnight. Second time I've been in the hospital in a month. For the record, I want to say this now publicly. I do not want to die in a hospital. So anybody in this room has got permission to pull the plug. If I'm in a hospital and you guys are walking down the hall, just come in and fucking yank it. It's horrible. It's like being in jail. You spend all your time waiting and you never get to eat what you want. It's noisy as hell and you can't sleep. And I always thought, both times I was in the hospital, I was in the room by the nurse's station. Seemingly prime real estate. You know what I mean? Like you're right there in case anything goes bad. But it's actually the loudest place in the whole place. And it's like a cocktail party at 4 a.m. and the nurses are laughing and shrieking and whatever. It's almost enough to make you wish you were in a vegetative state. At least I would have gotten some rest. So anyway, I will say this though. That almost without exception, the nurses were great to me. One of them, I don't remember her name, but she was a tatted up redhead, said to my friend Becky, "He's the best patient I've had all this week." At first I was really excited. Just this week? You know what I mean? It's like they build you up and then it's like, okay. But, I will say this, I think her name was Sheila. The overnight nurse I had was by far the most attentive nurse I've ever had in my entire life. She was a combination Jewish mother and really super codependent girlfriend. The kind that over time will end up totally resenting you. But right now we were in a honeymoon stage. And no detail was too small for her. Got enough blankets? You want more? You want less? You want a pillow? My foot? Need some water? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Do you want to watch TV? Are you hungry? Do you need a snack? Want me to make you a sandwich? Want me to rub your back? Want mommy to sing you a song? Want me to tell you a story? Want me to rub your feet? Want me to hold you? Do you need to go potty? Do you need to tinkle? After an angioplasty, you can't move or get out of bed, and I actually did have to pee real bad. So I said, well, I do have to pee, Sheila. So she brings in a bottle and says, do you need any help? I don't know. Now, I don't know about you guys, it's been a while since I peed in a bottle. And, you know, I've given a few urine samples in my time, but it's a big enough bottle, but there's definite technique involved. And I sure didn't want to wet the bed. And Sheila's still hovering. You need some help? Now, I'm a little slow, but I think I'm finally getting up to speed here. Is she offering to hold my penis? While I put it in the bottle? Now, trust me. In a different stage of my life and under certain circumstances, this would have been an intoxicating moment. A lot of relationships are based on less. But it did raise some questions and pose a dilemma, though. Not quite a Hobson's choice, but if I let her help me pee in the bottle, am I setting a precedent? Can wearing a diaper be far behind? How soon before they insert the feeding tube? I say, Sheila, I think I can manage. Later, I asked my friend Becky if holding a guy's penis while he pees in a bottle was a regular part of the job. She said it depends on your insurance. So I went to the hospital with strict instructions from the doctor. No strenuous exercise and no sex for 6 weeks. The tattooed nurse screams, God, doctor, it's Valentine's Day! Where's Sheila? I gotta pee. Okay. So, my last day at Green Chimneys was graduation day. That's the last time I ever graduated from anything. Unless you count gateway drugs. And I do. So the ceremony was held on the front porch of the new gym. It's a hot summer day in June of 1973. I don't know if we were seated alphabetically, but I was sitting right in the sun. It was brutal. The sun was beating me like a drum. As a present, one of the parents gave us each 2 LPs each. Records. So this is 1973, so I got Alice Cooper's School's Out. An obvious choice, perhaps, but a good choice. And the other record I got was Humble Pie's Rockin' the Fillmore, which is a double album. My mama didn't raise no dummy. So one of the things I remember most about that day, other than the rockin' tunes and the sunstroke, was a letter someone read from a teacher that had just died. It was one of those, when you read this letter, I'll be dead. We all had her, we all knew her, and I can't remember her name. I want to say it was Hannah. I want to say she was a Holocaust survivor. I want to say she taught me lessons that I still carry with me. Could that be wrong? I went back to Green Chimneys a few years ago, and I talked to Rollo, the headmaster, and asked him if he remembered it. He couldn't come up with her name either. So I do remember the letter. Congratulations, graduates. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Not mine, but yours. So enjoy. By the time you read this letter, I'll be dead. I've decided to use what is left of my remaining strength to hopefully convey in words some of the pleasure my many years of teaching you has brought me. My time at Green Chimneys has given me rewards that I did not know were possible. These may be the rose-colored reflections of an old dying woman. But when I saw the spark in the eyes of a child suddenly figuring out a problem, it filled me with untold joy that I only felt when my own children were born. Even the struggles and the tears were fulfilling. Knowing that the idea of hard work and diligence would pay off in the long run, and you would utilize these tools to better your life beyond these walls, was a gift beyond any measure. As you survey the landscape before you and you cross the fields of opportunity that have been laid out to guide you, the words of a wise man come to mind. Action breeds confidence and courage. If you want to conquer fear, do not sit home and think about it. Go out and get busy. That wise man was Dale Carnegie. So get busy, children. Rise up, children. Rise up and take what is rightfully yours. Rise up and seize the day. My time is getting near, and I am weaker and weaker by the moment. So I want to say this before my time runs out. While I don't blame him completely, I can't help but think, even at this advanced age, with a body totally racked with pain, I still might have had a couple of good years left if I hadn't been forced to teach Chris Anger math. He may not have given me the cancer that has taken me from you. But rest assured, and God is my witness, my blood is all over his diploma. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.